Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for remaining with us. I was here with you 1 year ago, and this conference I think is a wonderful time to reflect on where we stand today. In this industry, we're talking a lot right now about how much has changed over the course of the last year. But I want to take a moment to start by reflecting on what hasn't changed in the last year. There are still 5 offshore wind lease areas off of the coast of California. It's still necessary for project developers to engage with tribes, communities, fisheries, and others impacted by their projects. The wind off of our coast is still blowing in a way that balances really nicely with our solar resource. Port development remains on the critical path to any successful offshore wind project in California. And critically, our fundamental goal hasn't changed. Our goal remains 100% clean energy to power California's growing economy by 2045. And there's one more important thing that hasn't changed. Offshore wind needs to deliver as an energy resource in order to be a part of our SB 100 future. I want you to hold all of this consistency with you now in 2025, and these are the same messages that I touched on last year. When it comes to long-term infrastructure, you need long-term vision. There are a lot of voices that sing an overly optimistic chorus when the wind is at their back, and those same voices can lose the tune when they face a headwind. So remain steady and envision a future that builds on everything that hasn't changed. Those are the fundamentals. Now let me turn from vision to the daily grind of infrastructure development at scale. Over the course of today, you've heard about the benefits of collaborating with local governments, about workforce development, and about supply chains. These are all part of the large-scale infrastructure development story, and now I will turn to the energy part of the story and the PUC's role in it. But first, let me emphasize one point. California can lead the US in floating offshore wind, just as we did with electric vehicles and solar photovoltaics. Challenges lie ahead, and they may be daunting, but our creativity is boundless, and we know how to solve problems. So offshore wind can drive economic growth and help lift up communities. At the same time, offshore wind has tremendous promise for meeting the state's clean energy goals. We should keep in mind that this discussion about building floating offshore wind turbines will take a long time. Offshore wind is a long lead time resource requiring development across sectors, including ports, transmission, supply chain, research and development, ecosystem management, manufacturing, and more. We will use our integrated resource planning process to help plan for the grid of the future and evaluate the resources that will contribute to our reliable and clean grid. Our most recent plan has us building over 74 gigawatts of new clean nameplate capacity by 2039. We know we will need a lot of new clean energy resources to support our economy while delivering on our clean energy goals and maintaining reliability. Offshore wind has a complementary profile to onshore wind and solar resources because its output is uncorrelated to both of those. Onshore wind has reduced output during the summer months, and solar, of course, doesn't generate at night. Offshore wind has a high capacity factor. It operates nearly 50% of the time in winter months and over 60% during the summer. 7.6 gigawatts of offshore wind would generate about 35 terawatt hours of electricity annually, which is approximately 9% of California's projected 2040 demand of 395 terawatt hours. Offshore wind is a long lead time resource with a huge potential that can help to serve demand growth from electric vehicles, from data centers, and from the broader decarbonization of our economy. But offshore wind can also drive significant transmission costs, especially on the North Coast. The North Coast has a world-class wind resource, but very limited transmission capacity. This contrasts with the Morro Bay lease areas, which have a less powerful, though still excellent wind resources, but are nearer to the transmission tie-in point currently used by the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. In order to determine which resources California should plan for, our integrated resource planning process considers resource potential, resource costs, and transmission costs to determine the best resource portfolio consistent with our clean energy goals that maintains reliability. Said another way, offshore wind could play an important and complementary role to other renewable resources like solar, storage, and onshore wind. But there are many unknowns, including the specific cost of these projects for ratepayers. We expect offshore wind to compete with other renewable resources on a cost basis to be selected as part of our SB 100 portfolio. And this is exactly the message I shared in August when the PUC authorized procurement of up to 10 gigawatts of long lead time resources, including up to 7.6 gigawatts of offshore wind through central procurement. Long lead time resources aren't needed until the 2030s, with the first offshore wind deliveries coming online in mid-2037, long after our next presidential election. So we have time on our side. As a reminder, authorizing central procurement does not guarantee central procurement, nor is central procurement the only procurement mechanism available. Back in 2024, in August, when we approved central procurement, I urged the PUC to evaluate future contracts proposed through that mechanism by looking to the alternative clean resources that could fulfill the same needs and niches that we're looking for long lead time resources to deliver. We're looking for long lead resources to serve our SB 100 goals. Those resources are not ends in and of themselves. Our historic call for up to 7.6 gigawatts of offshore wind is a strong endorsement of the industry's potential. We are serious about pursuing these resources, and as I said at the beginning of the talk, a new federal administration does not change our clean energy goals. And it doesn't change our responsibility with all energy procurement to hold the industry to a high standard so that Californians see the benefit of large-scale clean energy infrastructure development. As we evaluate future contracts that are submitted to the Commission for reasonableness review, we fully expect to see material ratepayer benefits in return for their investment. We need to see resources that offer clean, reliable energy, that achieve cost efficiencies at scale, and that deliver energy benefits that we can justify in comparison to alternative clean energy options. We expect to see comparability to broader market power purchase agreements with clean energy technologies that deliver similar energy characteristics. This will be a key metric when evaluating offshore wind procurement. With a focus on the energy benefits of offshore wind, we can anticipate that future commissions will still need to exercise judgment about development contracts. What degree of above-market pricing is justified by the value of initiating a declining cost curve for offshore wind in the state? How likely are offshore wind deployment costs to decline and produce future projects that are more cost competitive with other clean resources? What are the planning consequences of project failure? What clean alternatives can realistically deliver the benefits that these resources will offer? These questions will not be easy, and they're the same questions that I posed in August of 2024 when we authorized central procurement with a more supportive federal administration. As many of you know, the President signed an executive order in January pausing new offshore wind leases, reevaluating existing leases, and pausing permit issuance for offshore wind. This does mean for the next 4 years, we may not be able to increase the pipeline for offshore wind through new lease issuance. And we can anticipate that federal funding support will be more difficult to obtain. But it is important to keep in mind that we don't know how all of this will play out, legally or administratively. The news about Empire Wind offers hope for constructive progress and as many have acknowledged, the potential for large-scale domestic energy production resonates with the interest in energy independence and reliability. We're going to keep working. We will certainly have to adjust, but it doesn't change our North Star. Our North Star remains 100% clean energy by 2045. The good news is that the existing 2 leases offshore of Humboldt could be used to develop 2.6 gigawatts of offshore wind, while the 3 leases offshore of the larger Morro Bay lease areas could lead to development of 7.5 gigawatts. This is tremendous potential, 10 gigawatts. It is more than the amount selected in the most recent IRP, Integrated Resource Plan through 2040, and more than our central procurement authorization of 7.6 gigawatts. The state will continue to make progress toward offshore wind deployment over the next 4 years. Projects in existing leases have timelines that are generally not targeting completion during this federal administration. Work continues in the state to bolster the scaffolding that California, and indeed the entire US, has been building around offshore wind development. I've talked about central procurement already. We're studying and planning for transmission development, including capacity optionality in the North Coast. We're planning for seaport readiness and evaluating supply chains under AB3. And California may need to shoulder a heavier burden to keep projects moving. For example, the $10 billion climate bond includes $475 million, as we've talked about today, for port development and modernization for offshore wind. Nothing in the recent executive order lessens the strategic value of offshore wind as a reliable evening and winter resource that complements the generation profile of our solar. The PUC will continue to study and evaluate offshore wind and other resources in its integrated resource planning process, and we will continue to plan and build the clean energy infrastructure that will support California's economy and meet our clean energy goals. California is playing an historic and leading role in global decarbonization, powering one of the world's largest economies with increasingly clean power, with our sights set on 100% clean energy by 2045. And we in this room share a vision that spurring floating offshore wind development in the US can blaze a trail towards reaching that goal, towards serving our clean energy goals. That shared vision is important, and we must combine that vision with a clear-eyed assessment of our energy needs, including energy affordability, and of the infrastructure development pathways that lie ahead of us. With all of that said, I'm going to leave you with the next panel to discuss offshore wind procurement at scale. Thank you, everyone.